Good evening. Please remember that these Tuesday nights are meant not only as periods of instruction, but periods of healing as well, because spiritual healing is an important part of the message of the infinite way. Those who are students of the infinite way already know that when they come to a meeting, a lecture, or a class, that they do not come to receive. They come that, let's call it the grace of God, may flow through their consciousness or as the activity of their consciousness and heal and redeem and lift up, forgive. A healing consciousness is one that blesses. A healing consciousness is a benediction. In the Occident, we are not quite as familiar with this subject as they are in the Orient, where it is known that one who is spiritually enlightened may bring spiritual release, freedom, to those in bondage, whether physical, mental, moral, or financial bondage. In some countries of the Orient, this experience is called darshan, and people go to the spiritually enlightened to receive darshan. But they not only go to people, they go to holy places where, because of the presence of some spiritually enlightened teachers, the whole atmosphere is one of spirituality, of blessing, of healing. One receives darshan, sometimes in other countries called satori, merely by being in the presence of those who live in an atmosphere of God, of the Spirit. To some extent, we realize that in the Occident, when people go into churches, not only when there are services, but at other times during the day, to find comfort, to find ease in prayer, meditation, but actually what they receive in that church is not so much from their own meditation, because actually they may come in so troubled that they cannot achieve meditation unless the particular minister, priest, or rabbi is of such spiritual enlightenment that that church or temple has taken on that atmosphere. And then, as you walk into that church or temple or synagogue, you find that the atmosphere there, the very spirit in the air, enables you to settle down into quiet, peace, meditation, and then inwardly receive God's grace in the form of healing or comfort or whatever you came there for. This is true of our public work, whether these talks or lectures, if you call them that, or our classwork, or our tape work. The main object of these is not to teach so much as it is to impart this inner peace or quiet through the atmosphere, the consciousness of those who are there. On my part, I prepare for this work by hours and hours and hours of meditation each day and night. And those of our students who are far enough along on the path likewise prepare themselves for these occasions, so that when you come into this room, you actually do not come into this room at all. You are coming into the prepared spiritual atmosphere that has been created by meditation, by inner communion with God, by those of us who are devoting ourselves to this particular form of life. Every room bears the atmosphere of those who live in those rooms. That is why very often those who are sensitive, who have to live in hotels a great deal, travel a great deal, can almost tell when they walk into their hotel room who's been there or what state of consciousness has been there before them. It is so marked. Certainly, just as when you walk into a church, you know the nature of the minister by the atmosphere. So when you walk into the home of one who is living, to some extent at least, in the Word of God, you can feel that atmosphere in their home. You can feel that peace. You can feel that quiet. And if those who live there truly understand the nature of meditation, many, many healings should take place when guests enter their home. Let us remember this. We are not people as we seem to be. We are states of consciousness. We can be very, very materialistic states of consciousness, and we can begin to fail to bring forth harmony, health, wholeness in our experience, and begin to turn from that material sense to a higher consciousness, the spiritual consciousness. And as we do, our nature changes, and the atmosphere that goes out from our mind changes. And then all of a sudden, those who come into our presence must feel that they are entering the presence of spiritual consciousness. You can understand that very clearly if I just remind you of what you would expect if you had been privileged to walk along the shores of Galilee and one day meet the Master, Christ Jesus. What do you think you would feel if you entered that presence? Would you by any chance believe that you are not in the presence of someone set apart, someone different than the ordinary run of Hebrew rabbis? Or even if you met some of the disciples during those 3 years when they were so much with the Master, do you not believe that you would catch immediately that they were not ordinary fishermen? Would you not feel something, discern something different about them? Try to think of meeting Saul of Tarsus, and perhaps a year or two later, St. Paul, and see what you would have expected of Saul of Tarsus, or what you would expect now of Paul, and see if you would have had the same feeling the first time as the second time. And of course the answer you know well. You probably would have shrunk away from Saul of Tarsus. You would have discerned the bias, the bigotry, the hatred, and probably some of the intellectuality too. And then meeting the same man later as Paul, I'm sure that you never would have been reminded of the fact that he was one of the great Hebrew intellectuals, for now you would have felt that humility that enabled him to say, I live, yet not I. Christ liveth my life. So it is, the difference between walking into the consciousness of a human being and into one who has been touched by some measure of spiritual light is just the same. The human being has a well-developed sense of I. Whether that I is a big businessman or a big professional man, or whether that I is someone of wealth or of society, whether that I is someone prominent in this field or that field, that sense of I inevitably is there because that is what humanhood is founded on. Those who have learned to live in the Word and let the Word live in them catch first of all the meaning of the Master's statement, I can of my own self do nothing. If I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie. The Father within me, he doeth the works. I and my Father are one, but the Father is greater than I. The minute you come into an atmosphere of that kind, you are in the presence of humility, which is the outward sign of an inward grace, because it bears witness to the fact that the individual who knows this has come into conscious contact with that which is greater than himself, with that which really is the law and the life under this entire universe, including all of those who live in it. A healing consciousness is one that has had that experience of coming face to face with that which can never be explained, can never be understood with the mind, which can only be discerned through the soul faculties. We do have two sets of faculties. We have the 5 physical senses, and we have the reasoning mind. But we have another set of faculties, quite separate and apart from those, and that is inner discernment. I have used the term always soul faculties, faculties of the soul. They operate independently of human reasoning, of human thought, although often they result in our receiving thoughts. It is these soul faculties that make it possible to receive truth, which, of course, the mind could never grasp. Let us see how that operates for a moment, so that you too will know how meditation works, and then later how metaphysical or mystical treatment works. I say to you, speaking with 30 years of experience, that there is only one power. Now, of course, if you have experienced a spiritual healing, more especially if you have ever been responsible for one, you already know that this is truth, because you have had it demonstrated to you that that which was called disease or sin or fear never was a power, because on coming in contact with this understanding, these negative thoughts and things dissolved and disappeared. But supposing now that you are one of those who have not yet experienced the fourth dimensional experience of healing or being healed, and I were to say to you, there is only one power, your answer would more than likely be that which I have received hundreds of times. Oh, you say there is only one power, and that's God? Let me take you down the street to this hospital, to this mental institute, to this cemetery, and I'll show you some other powers. Certainly, as humans, we are constituted of the belief of two powers, and that is what makes us humans. Without that one single belief in two powers, we would no longer be human beings. We would already be what Paul called sons of God. We would already be praying for our enemies, so that, as Jesus said, we might be or become sons of God. Surely, in proportion then, as you can find it possible to accept one power, you are already yielding some of your egotistical sense, which is based, of course, on accepting appearances, and you are beginning to discern that there is more to this life and world than meets the eye, or ear, or taste, or touch, or smell, or even reason. Much more to this world than the reasoning mind can account for. Then, hear this, when you have your period of meditation, your very first thought must be that we are dwelling in a universe, in an atmosphere of one power. Now let us see what this will do for you, because this is the only way that you can carry on a meditation successfully. Be assured of this, you never will succeed in meditation or in spiritual healing until you have been able to bring yourself to the realization of one power. And the reason is this: as long as you have two powers, you will be reaching for a God to do something to the powers you would like destroyed, and there is no such God. This very sad world has been going on for thousands of years, waiting and praying in many ways, in many forms, in many languages, for this good, great God to do something to all the evil influences in this world. And the evil keeps right on going and multiplying. There is no such God. And those who sit and wait will continue to sit and wait until their 80 years have eaten them up. But to glimpse in some measure that there are not two powers as there seem to be. There is but one power, and therefore we are not praying to a big power to destroy a little power. We're not even praying for one power to destroy another power of any size, shape, or form, or person. Rather, we are sitting here in meditation to contemplate that which is the only presence and the only power. Strangely enough, there are two powers in the human world, and always will be, until this belief of two powers touches the consciousness of an individual who has come to see that God is infinite, and that you cannot have an infinite God and some form of negative power. You can't have an infinite good and an evil. Now, note this change, because here is where the important part of Christianity comes in. While we are under the belief of two powers, we are under the law. Ye have heard it said of old, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That's the law. Ye have heard it said of old, stone the adulteress and kill her. That's the law. You have heard it said of old, do this and do that. That's the law. And the reason it is the law is that there is good and evil, and we must do something horrible to the evil to get rid of it. Would be nice if we could. In all the centuries of stoning adulteresses, we haven't gotten rid of them. In all of the centuries of imprisoning thieves, we haven't gotten rid of them. Oh, no, you don't destroy error by fighting it. Why? Because I say unto you, who am I? This is Jesus Christ speaking through the fourth dimensional new consciousness. I say unto you, resist not evil. I say unto you, put up thy sword. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. I say unto you, Don't seek revenge. Don't seek to punish the thief who robbed you. I say unto you, forgive. 70 times 7 forgive, and then start praying for your enemies. Pray for your enemies in order that you may become children of God, because, and I say this too, it profiteth you nothing to pray for your friends. It profiteth you nothing to pray for your friends. Oh, but you'll keep on doing it. It's so much easier to pray for them than for your enemies. We always want to do the easiest thing, even if in the long run it's going to destroy us. But the Master said that this way is straight and narrow, and few there be that enter, because there are so few capable of maintaining persistently and consistently that there is only one power. Thou, Pilate, hast no power over me, unless it comes from God. Or to the crippled man, what did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. What did hinder you? There is no power of evil. There is no power of sin. There is no power of disease. There is only one power. Pick up your bed and walk. Neither do I condemn thee. This really must have been a horrible thing for the Hebrews to hear. Neither do I condemn thee to an adulteress. Horror of horrors. They were meant to be stoned to death. And yet he, a rabbi, says, neither do I condemn thee. Thief on the cross. I will take you with me into paradise this very night. No resistance, no opposition, no punishment, no sword. No, resist not evil. Put up thy sword. Acknowledge one power. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy mind. How can I love the Lord so completely, so absolutely, unless I have come into the awareness that this Lord can be loved because it is the only God, the only one, the only Spirit, the only presence, the only power, then indeed can I worship and adore and praise. Then certainly I can be at peace. Now, when you enter meditation, be sure that you put up your sword. Be sure that you are not hiding behind those eyes for the purpose of destroying your enemy, or rising above your enemy, or overcoming your enemy, or doing battle with your enemy. Be sure that when you close your eyes in meditation, it is to contemplate the divine presence, besides which there is no other. Be sure that your closed eyes represent the outer sign of an inner grace, a heart and a mind at peace, because it is contemplating God, not fearing error, not fearing this sin, not fearing this disease, contemplating God, the only, the all, the infinite, the omnipotent, the omnipresent. Be sure, when you close your eyes in meditation, that you are not going to God for any favors. you won't receive any. Save yourself heartaches and disappointments. Don't go to God for favors. I have said this so many times in classes, and it bears repetition. When you go to God, go in the same spirit that you would go to your mother. If your mother was 1,000 miles away and you could visit her, I'm sure you would go there just for the joy of being in her presence, just for the joy of sitting there with her, not asking favors. True, she may be rich. True, she may have lots of favors to give, but you wouldn't be there asking for them. Oh, no. No, and this is the spirit in which we go to God, not for something, but for the joy of contemplation, for the joy of communion, the joy of holding hands, if you like. It sometimes happens that you feel the very presence of God in that way, as a hand touching your hand, or a hand touching your shoulder, or a hand touching your forehead. Because the hand of God is closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet. And if it isn't a physical hand, it sometimes feels like one, strong but gentle. Meditation is really the gateway to heaven, if meditation is understood. Be at peace in meditation, and you cannot be at peace if you want something. You cannot be at peace if you have a desire. You cannot be at peace if you're longing for something, or if you are feeling a sense of separation. You can only be at peace when you are in communion with the Divine Spirit. Naturally, in the first months and sometimes even years of meditation, it isn't a simple matter to find that peace instantly. But the way to find it is to be sure when you go into your meditation, number one, that you are not thinking of God as a power. You are thinking of God only as a spiritual presence, a joy. Be sure when you go into these meditations that you do not accept two powers, but that your whole contemplation is God alone is, and God alone is power, and I seek no other, and I need no other. And you will find how quickly then you can come into the atmosphere of meditation. All that prevents beautiful meditation, peaceful meditation, is this seeking of a higher power. And there are no higher powers. There is only one power. There's no higher power and there's no lower power. There is only one power, and that power is the grace of God. It doesn't do anything to anything. It doesn't even do anything to anyone. It just is. It just is like the sunshine is. The sunshine is. And whatever it is, it's glorious. And whatever God is, that's glorious too. It is when we seek God for a purpose that we set up a barrier between ourselves and God. It is often believed by young students of meditation that there should be an attempt to stop human thinking, to blank the mind or blank the thought. This isn't true. This has been accomplished by some people, but as a general rule, they'll end up mental subjects. It's a very dangerous practice. It never leads to any good. The contemplation of God will still the thought and ultimately silence it. But you can't do it, because the very you that's trying is the human mind. That's all there is to the you that's trying to still the human mind, is the human mind. And that's why it can't succeed. But if you contemplate God as a presence, as the one power, the only power, or the none power, just being, Spirit itself, acting always through grace. As you contemplate some of the scriptural promises, some of the scriptural passages of assurance, you will find that the human mind will silence itself or be silenced by whatever it is that takes over in that period of contemplation. Don't try to stop your mind working. As long as your mind wants to work, let it work with spiritual passages of truth. Let it work as a contemplation. Now, in our work, there are 3 stages to meditation. The first is contemplative meditation, which I have found to be the best form of meditation for the Occidental thought. That is, for those of us of the Occident who have never been trained in Oriental forms of meditation, especially those who haven't been trained from childhood up. Contemplative meditation, that is, contemplating the presence, contemplating God's grace, contemplating God as one and only, contemplating scriptural passages of promise, of assurance, of divine presence. 23rd Psalm, for instance, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Contemplating all passages of is. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God is in the midst of me. God is the soul, the spirit, the life. God's grace is my sufficiency. This leads itself to a stilling of the 5 physical senses and of the reasoning mind. This itself leads to an inner stillness when the second phase of meditation takes over. And this second phase is communion. This is where there are 2 enter the scene. There is I myself in meditation and contemplation coming face to face with the realization of a presence within me, of a spirit, of a gentleness, of something other than myself. It may take effect as an inner warmth, a glow. Sometimes it actually speaks. Or, at other times, we receive impressions, almost as if we heard the voice. Sometimes later, we're not sure whether we actually heard a voice or received an impression. But it is in this stage that we are in communion with God. We are in communion with the Spirit. And a something takes place and goes back and forth as if it were from me to God and from God to me. A flow, a gentle flow, backwards and forwards, in and out. And I know that I'm in communion. I know the Spirit is with me. The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me. And I am ordained to heal the sick. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And the Spirit of the Lord is here, and I feel it, and I feel a freedom. I feel a dropping away of problems, sometimes of sin, of disease. It's an actual experience of release. And this is the second stage of meditation, which is communion. The third stage, of course, is the ultimate, and that is conscious union with God. And in this stage, the personal or separate selfhood disappears, and it is as if one were not there as a person, but that God itself were there, and only God. It must have been in moments like this that the Master could speak from the standpoint of the word I and say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Now, that wasn't a man speaking. That was God speaking. And the man Jesus was temporarily absent from the body. I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. That wasn't a man, because the man said later, if I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. So it wasn't a man saying, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. It was God speaking when Jesus was absent from himself. And there was only the Spirit of the Lord God there. These moments have come to every mystic who is known in literature. And in the mystical literature of all of this world, whether of the Occident or of the Orient, the mystics speak out from that word I, as if God itself was speaking and they weren't there, or as if they were God and speaking as God. When you come to know the mystics, you know that none of them ever made the mistake of believing that a human being is God or can ever become God, but that in the absence of this human sense of self, God speaks. These are periods of illumination. These are periods such as Moses experienced, when he could say, I am that I am. These were moments that Jesus experienced when he could say, I am the meat, I am the wine, I am the water. At other times he merely said, I have meat that ye know not of. There was that I and that presence again. In our work I have told you often that when this presence is realized, you will find that it actually is your supply. It actually is new organs and functions of the body. It actually does take form as your home, your family, your human relationships, your parking spaces even. There is an actual presence that is as real as we are real to each other. And there is a relaxing, once that is felt and experienced, there is a relaxing from personal effort. I can of my own self do nothing. This is the man speaking, the man, Jesus. I can of my own self do nothing. If I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie. And then the presence is realized, and I have meat the world knows not of. I could give you waters, living waters. And then later on to the third stage, and I am the way. I am the truth. And there it is, God speaking as individual being, the Word made flesh, God incarnate, and walking this earth. This ultimately is the destiny of every individual. There is an overturning and an overturning and an overturning in individual consciousness until he come, whose right it is, that he is God. There will be an overturning in our consciousness, and it will appear to us as a battle, a warfare between the flesh and the spirit, a warfare between disease and health, between lack and abundance, finally a warfare between the two eyes, the eye that is Joel and the eye that is God. And oh, Joel dies hard. It wants to perpetuate itself. It wants to be something, to do something, to know something. And that warfare goes on until finally Joel is shaken so thoroughly that he awakens to the fact that I'm nothing. But the eye which is God, is it, and it is all. And then meditation takes on its final phase, when in this nothingness of Joel, the Father speaks. And the Father takes over, and the Father heals, and the Father redeems, and the Father instructs. And as Paul lived to learn, the Father lives our lives. That is our ultimate destiny. Every one of us eventually will come to Paul's state of consciousness in the realization, I live, yet not I. Christ, the Son of God, the very Spirit of presence of God, lives my life. Then and only then are we in the presence of the absolute humility, a humility that has in it not one single trace of virtue, but of realization of truth. It literally is true. I am nothing, can do nothing, can be nothing. Yes, there is a sense of emptiness, but strangely enough, with the sense of emptiness, there is the sense of fullness, of completeness, of perfection, and yet not in any personal sense. You remember the old-fashioned affirmations? You are spiritual, you are perfect, you are whole. And then the practitioner with a sense of humor says, why do you come to me then? You don't have that feeling that I am spiritual and I am perfect and I am whole. You have more the feeling of being absent, of having no qualities, and yet feeling this transcendent presence which is doing it, and almost you're looking over your shoulder and watching it live your life. That's the sense of it. Though I'm sure Jesus experienced a higher sense when he had even no recollection of himself and could speak only from the standpoint of I am the way. Now, just to make sure that you do not miss this point, in your meditation, you will become a blessing to everyone who comes within range of your thought. In your meditation, there will be such an atmosphere created and emanate from you that it will produce an atmosphere even in the walls and on the floors and in the ceilings, so that others who come into that room where you meditate will feel the spiritual presence. But remember that this can only be if in your meditation you surrender your sword. Take up no battles. Be sure that you are not fighting error. Be sure that you are not trying to overcome it. Be sure that you are not seeking God to have God do something for you. Be sure that your entire meditation while you are in the contemplative stage is, the Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. God's grace is my sufficiency. The infinite nature of God makes it true that the place whereon I stand is holy ground, for I and the Father are one. Always the Father says, Son, thou art ever with me. All that I have is thine. I will never leave thee, nor forsake thee. My presence will go before you. My presence is with you. Fear not. Fear not. For I am with you. And then you see, that brings this, call it an activity of grace. And whatever of an erroneous nature touches your consciousness is then dissolved. God's grace, the realization of God, dissolves all of the effects of the belief of two powers. This belief of two powers is not necessarily yours or mine, remember. This is a universal belief that was here before you and I were formed in our mother's womb. This is a universal belief which becomes your belief and mine as we are born and as we grow up. From the very first moment of our life on earth, somebody is saying, don't drop the baby, or don't bunk your knee, or don't fall down, or do eat spinach. Always remember that we are being given the suggestion of two powers, and the world never stops. It never stops throwing at us this belief of two powers, and it isn't any wonder that even with all of our meditations and all of our spiritual living, that sometimes we succumb and say, you must be right. Look what error did to me. But error can't do anything to me. Strangely enough, Joseph saw that when he couldn't agree that his brothers had brought about his troubles. God sent me before you into Egypt. So it is that God has ordained that we end up in the presence of God. But you must remember that we are resisting it, just as Joseph must have resisted it. It was so comfortable to be a rich man's son. And not only that, but to be the favored son of the rich man. Do you wonder that he didn't want to go down into Egypt? Do you wonder that he didn't want to leave his father's household? That he had to be kidnapped and sent there as a slave in order to fulfill his function? And so it is with us. Life gets very comfortable for us. Even sometimes in our sins and diseases, it's too comfortable for us to want to make the effort to move out of. And so it is that sometimes God takes us by the hand or by the neck and leads us to that which is our ultimate destiny, which is to stand in the presence of God and to stand forth as the presence of God. When will this day come on earth? It will come this day, as it has already come to many others in the past. This day in which an individual begins to grasp in some degree that there is only one power. For this is the whole secret. This is the whole secret of the Bible. Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden until they accepted two powers, good and evil. And that ended their holiday. From then on, they worked for a living, brought forth their children in pain. Every individual returns to the Garden of Eden in proportion as they can inwardly accept one power and put up that sword. You can tell when you are approaching it, first of all, by your own meditations, as they consist less and less of power, even the desire for a power, even the desire for overcoming. And then you can watch your progress when, because of that, those around you begin to ask for help. And always remember this. There is one sure way to be the biggest practitioner in any community, and the busiest one, and the most successful one, and the most prosperous one. And that is to lose all sense of two powers. Because somehow or other the world beats a pathway to the state of consciousness that is abiding in God as one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. Is there any other God, Isaiah asked? I know not any. And as you attain some measure of that realization, requests begin to come in for help. Then is the testing time. Because the first inclination is, here's my opportunity. And then we forget that even Jesus could say, I can of my own self do nothing. We try. And in trying, we lose that particular demonstration. But with practice, we do get to that place where someone asks for help, and we sit in that silence, contemplating God's presence, making no attempt to heal anyone or save anyone or redeem anyone or reform anyone or even forgive anyone. Now we are in that realization of God alone. Thy grace is my sufficiency, and his and hers. And with this first success comes a measure of healing. It takes a good deal of practice. It takes weeks and months, and it takes an awful lot of sins and diseases rendered null and void before you actually come to a place where it is automatic to sit down and rejoice in God's presence without wanting God to do something for you. It has helped me many, many times to remember when I go into meditation that I mustn't think of God as my servant, whom I am going to have do my will. It helps me when I go into meditation to remember that I am the servant of the Most High, and that I want to do nothing. I want to receive instruction, receive enlightenment, receive grace. This is what helps me always to achieve my inner peace. As soon as I can surrender any desire to have God do my bidding, even for a sick man or a sick woman. When I can remember that my position is always to be a servant of God, not an instructor or a master.